Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam, Raza. Hi, everyone.
Hey everyone, we'll give people a couple of minutes to finish connecting up. While we're doing that, if anyone has any additional agenda items, let me know and we'll add them.
Hi, Joe. Simon sends his apologies, and I guess I'm standing in for Red Hat.
Okay.
And in terms of agenda, I prepped a couple of slides for talking about a scoped milestone.
All right. That sounds fine. Hey Asim, hey Rosa.
I think I
Joe.
said I would do that for the TSC. I'm hoping it wasn't for the API meeting because I'm maybe getting my wires crossed.
No. This is that's excellent. Perfectly good.
Yeah.
I think we can. All right, let's get started. So first up, Asim and Rosa.
Yes, hi, Joe.
Hey. All right.
Hey,
So
good morning, guys. Risa here.
Hey, Risa. Okay. I'll stop sharing and you guys can share.
Yes, all right.
Take it away.
All right. So is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, all right. All right, so I had a meeting with HPE team guys, and I actually contacted them as a general member representative, and HPE are currently our general board members. So they shared this feedback and had this like input as well, and we had some action items to take. So I contacted like Gio and Sridhar, and they actually shared that we can actually bring them up in the TSC and we can assign them the action items to respective groups. So first of all, first point, these are point wise. First of point was that if they can actually join the TSC meeting. So Joe, I actually forwarded the invite to reserve for this meeting. So I don't think that there is anything explicitly required to
No,
be,
they
yes,
they can join. In
all right.
fact, I would encourage them to do so. They can make proposals, they can join. The only thing they can't do is vote if we have anything where a vote is required.
Okay,
Yes.
Right. So yes, it's completely available to anyone who's part of OPI.
All right. So yes, Reza, I would actually encourage you to actually join this meeting. I know there was some timing conflict, but if you're able to actually manage the other meetings, then it will be good to actually have this first-hand feedback and what's going on at OPI.
yeah, I'll try to join. I may be able to join every other week.
All right. All right. So the second point was that HP actually wanted to contribute some servers to the lab setup. That thread we are already going through with Sridhar, actually Paul and Joe. I think you are also in that thread. Where we actually HP actually require that there should be some sort of like NDA between HP and OPI, because there is some components in the server that they actually do not want to go into production. So that thread is ongoing. I think that Joe, what do you say, that we should discuss it over here, or we can first actually get it done offline and then bring it to
No, that
TSC?
one. So that one is between Linux Foundation and HPE as to the policies and procedures. Sridhar, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, see, I agree with it because when we say with OPI and HPE, none of the like OPI members will be signing the agreement, right? It will be Linux Foundation who will be signing the agreement, these kind of agreements. So we do sign agreements in the, for OPI for many cases, for example, events and a lot of other with other vendors when we procure some, buy some hardware and all those things. We do some of those things. But when it comes to this lab hardware, right? When I checked for the other use case, Linux Foundation answer was we don't sign any NDA because we don't control that lab. You know. It's OPI's lab. OPI has full freedom to do with that lab. So we don't, because we don't control the lab, we don't manage the lab, we cannot sign the NDA. That was the answer I got from for the previous very similar question. So I'm again asking the same question with respect to HP with our LF legal team. I'm waiting for their response. But my suspect is I'll get the same answer.
Yeah,
Because yeah.
yeah, this is like so I guess maybe we should have an offline discussion and uh in some more detail and come back with a conclusion, because this is like selling a piece of equipment to a customer. It's just the customer happens to be a multi-company consortium, of which, you know, the company doing the selling is also part of. I mean, this isn't a, I mean, I guess I'm not sure.
No, the issue is that the server we want to contribute is a pre-production server, and the components that are in there are under material licensing with the suppliers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But
So
it,
the
I mean,
idea is it cannot be used for production purposes, right? This can only be used for development purposes.
but I guess I don't understand what production would mean in the context of OPI, because everything we do is for basically proof of concept and development.
Right.
There is OPI has no production.
Exactly. Then that's why we're willing to offer it. But there still needs to be some agreement to that effect.
But I'm not sure who would.
So one of the options, Joe, that was talked about was creating a lab charter that had something in it that
Yes.
that equipment donated would be returned to the vendor when decommissioned, and that would always be used for proof of concept sort of stuff like that.
Yeah, those are the two key points.
So Reza, would a lab charter that stated that be good enough, or do you actually need a separate NDA for this piece of equipment?
We need a separate NDA for this piece of equipment.
Okay.
But so I mean the problem. Man, this is tricky because it'd be great to get a server in the lab that can handle DPUs, and I assume or handle DPUs well, because I assume that's the changes. But as soon as we demo it, I mean, again, all the other member companies are going to be able to see what's there if they go work on that.
Yeah,
server.
that's fine. That's fine. We don't have an issue with that.
So it's really just don't put it into production and
return it.
return it.
Yes.
Well, I mean, to return it, so Sridhar, the return it one, Linux Foundation as the sort of the mediator of the lab could guarantee that, correct?
So Linux Foundation will not do it. It will be like I'll be responsible. I will have to take and ship it back to the vendor. Yeah.
What happens to other Linux? Okay, let's take this offline, because in-way NDA with all the member companies,
It's not practical.
it's not practical, because I mean, all of the companies' lawyers would probably not. I mean, I'm suspecting they would not look on that too fondly.
Yeah, that's not what we're seeking.
And if Linux Foundation itself can't do it as sort of the central administrative, the body that's actually spending the money, right? Because we all contribute funding to Linux Foundation, which spends the money for the various lab costs.
Right, but we're not charging for this.
No, other than donated equipment.
Right.
But the lab operational costs are through Linux Foundation, right?
No, it's a project money. It's not Linux Foundation's money, right?
Yeah, but the project doesn't have any standing. Okay, does the project have any legal standing outside of its attachment to Linux Foundation?
No legal standing, but the cost and the fund is controlled by the project, right? The governing body.
That's just a budget. But okay, let's take this offline, and we may have to talk to. Okay, let's take this offline, because we could spend the rest of the hour going back and forth on trying to solve this.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sridhar, do you mind setting up a call with ask the relevant people, set up a call with the relevant people?
Correct. I will do that. I'm trying to get the legal team to discuss that.
Well, not just the legal team, but yeah, I mean, I guess we need the legal team as well and ask for our options. All right, set up a call with anyone who's interested. We'll do a one-off for this one outside of the TSC. Okay. Okay, so we'll see if we can address this, because it would be good if we could. All right, let's keep going.
All right. So next one was that we were actually really satisfied with the progress that we made on the provisioning and lifecycle group. They were really commending that the PCI compliance that mandate was achieved. So that actually helped them really get across some of the DPU or vendors that actually were not actually compliant to the PCI. So that they were really appreciating. And then in the API subgroup, HPC that actually I think this is a very common thing that we are seeing that there are protobuf definitions, but the adaptation of this API by the DP vendors, they actually it's not traceable that where we can see that those protobuf definitions or those API are being used by some DPU vendors. So I think that's some action item for the API subgroup that they can actually help us trace those or actually put up some example, like we're working on the quick start guide that how to set up these API for any DPU.
Mark, your thoughts?
I'm trying to understand what's being asked for, because we have a bunch of prototypes that are out there that are using the APIs that are defined. I'm trying to figure out what's being asked for.
Yeah, I'm personally not familiar with this issue. Asim, do you remember what Toshi was talking about?
Yes, I think again it was like putting up those quick start guides. It's in the next point as well. But so you see that they say that for the provisioning, they know that, okay, where to start and what to look for. But for the API group, they were not actually clear that what to look for and where to start from.
Okay, so this is really around the quick start guides that we've been talking about, Joe.
Yeah.
This is so yeah, the quick start guides need to reference how or what mechanisms you can use to leverage the APIs. But yeah, okay, I see where this is coming from now.
Yeah, just to add to that, the VPN Gateway API, we are working on some contributions to OPI VPN Bridge in order to have like full support of that API with a fully upstream code that runs on Intel Mount Evans IPUs. So the API that we have there, it will work in the future, in the near future, in Intel Mount Evans IPUs. So it's fully supported API.
All right. So the quick start guide, I think that's the point that we need to actually come up with the quick start guides. And again, the next point was actually that as we were actually keen to see that the API support that is being added, that is somehow like controlled by the like Ansible. So are we actually looking to support the API with Ansible?
Yeah, that's what was being discussed in the provisioning group.
Yes, all right. So, and lastly, actually, there was this like confusion saying that we actually were not aware that I'm representing them. Or like there is some general member representative at the board that I've actually already talked, and I think Sridhar asked to share my profile. So we'll put up that profile on the website so that the general board members can also know that who's the general board member representative.
Yeah, and thanks for doing that, Asim. I appreciate that.
That's all right. Thank you. So this was it from my side.
All right. Anybody have any questions or discussion points? Okay. Raisa, were you also going to, did you also have
I didn't have any additional topics. I think Asim did a great job there. Thank you very much.
all right. I mean, on the quick start guide, Ressa, if you wanted to volunteer or have someone volunteer to start one, I'm sure everyone would be willing to kick in. We haven't had anyone volunteer yet to actually start one. So, you know, and this whole thing runs on a pretty much a volunteer basis.
Yeah, I'll discuss it internally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and anyone else that extends to anyone else on the call as well. If you wanted to get a quick start guide going, I'm sure people would contribute, and I'm sure if you asked them for help, hey, how does this work? How do you do this? they're more than willing to answer questions. People have been very good about that. And then, do we want to post these notes in in one of our GitHubs? Or I could post them if you
Just in the meeting minutes?
send me a copy, I can post them in the meeting minutes.
Yeah, I'll send you a copy.
That's probably the best thing. All right, I'll attach them to the meeting minutes whenever you send them.
All right.
All right. Okay, Donald, you're up.
Okay, let me share. Can you see what I'm sharing?
Yes, sir.
Try and get it to actually fill the screen. Okay, so this is a follow-up from the slides we presented 3 or 4 weeks ago, I guess. And I brought the topic up at the TSC briefly last week. And it's really about defining a really minimal scope of a milestone 1 that we can all get agreed on. So just as a quick recap, the slides I presented a few weeks ago kind of set the scene a little bit about the challenge of working with the high-level use cases and how we don't have like an agreed minimum value proposition, and ways in which we could move forward. And we presented just briefly what we thought from Red Hat's perspective was a necessary set of things that we needed to get agreed in order to build on that foundation, just talking across need for provisioning, need for basic networking, and need for running opaque workloads. So that was all what presented a few weeks ago. So on building on that, we really want to just step into actually defining and proposing an approach to defining a minimum scope. And so what do I mean by that? So really, we want to scope down to a really, really simple first milestone, a small scope that we can all agree on, something that shouldn't have any contentious issues about resolving, and is a nice, simple foundation that other things can build on top of. So, to my point earlier, I don't think we're really looking for an MVP. I think we're looking for a foundation, and we can build MVPs on top of that. Suggesting that we call it milestone 1 and maybe have an idea in mind for what we want in scope for a milestone 2, and really be planning on those future milestones. And I've kind of come up with the idea of maybe we think of those as feature bundles that are built on top of the foundations. And the rest of it, what I'm going to talk about is really just trying to home in on what that milestone 1 foundation should be. And just here, I'm just saying that it probably will encompass some part of the automated provisioning, the basic networking, and the ability to run workloads, because that seems like a base building block that other use cases will need to rely on. So just from a networking perspective, taking the PR that Dan Daly posted a couple of weeks ago and talked us through, and saying, well, that's too big a scope to be considered for a first milestone. So what is a meaningful scope within that we can maybe focus on? And my first pass through this is, well, let's try and pick 3 or 4 items which are manageable as one foundation feature set. And I've picked out port config, virtual device config, endpoint, L3 endpoint config, and routing tables. And we're talking about static routing tables, not running IGPs or EGPs or anything like that. So just making it possible for somebody to run IGPs or EGPs on top, but with an interface to program routing tables. And then subsequent milestones could build on this either with feature bundles like link redundancy, or by expanding the scope of L3 endpoint and routing to cover more Kubernetes features, for example. And so the point here is really to show we've chosen a minimum foundation, and subsequent feature bundles could either add adjacent feature sets or build on the functionality that's already been provided in the foundation. And I think that's how we need to move forward. I think we need a mechanism to discuss and agree what we want this minimal milestone 1 config to be. But this is kind of a proposal. And then moving forward just to running workloads, going back through what's been discussed before. I know we've talked about Ansible. I know we use Ansible a bit in some of the OPI repos already. And we've talked around various orchestration mechanisms. And we certainly shouldn't be rolling our own orchestration. And the choices we've got available to us are some kind of systemd level process orchestration, or one of the available OCI container orchestration mechanisms, whether that be something like Podman or Kubernetes. And Podman and Kubernetes share or can both consume Kubernetes YAML specs. So perhaps homing in on something that's already available, using YAML specs to specify workloads and using Podman or Kubernetes to orchestrate them would be a minimal foundation way forward. And really from there, I'm leaving it for discussion. That was really, I just wanted to put out a kind of suggested minimal scope, define it as a milestone 1, and start people moving towards, can we agree this milestone 1 scope and have in mind how we want to build on that in future milestones.
So, Donald, I think it's a good list. There's one thing that I would add to it. I would add L2 into that list, but that would be all I add.
So I really mean L2 port config here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because there is a line that's called virtual L2 learning, which I'm not as concerned about with virtual L2 learning, but we do need to put L2 functionality in there. So I think, adding that in there.
And that's an interesting one, because we internally at Red Hat, we had a little bit of a discussion about whether we should have like a dumb learning switch or a programmable switch or something like that. We felt that you know, a learning switch is probably the simplest because it's fewer API definitions in the first run.
Yep.
And then we can build on that and have a programmable, which is a subsequent phase. So yeah, we can. I'll refine the slides just to kind of cover those points.
Yeah.
May I ask?
Yeah, go ahead. Well, Mark, final comment on that, and then Elad, you can go.
No,
I think Elad's maybe got a bigger topic. So just following up with Mark, when you said L2 needs to be included, Mark, did you mean L2 switching per se, or just mapping MAC addresses to packet routing?
At least doing mapping of packet addresses to routing at a minimum, but we may put, depending upon how we want to define the scope, we could put L2 switching in there. You may want to put VLAN capability in there.
Yeah,
we go too much beyond that.
You're going to have VLAN. You're going to have settings for Mac learning and ARP. You're going to have the
so if I could say a distinction, Joe, I think in my mind, at least, I think I agree with Mark. I would call it an L2 listener capability, where we're listening on certain Macs and we're pointing those packets at the host or an ARM workload or
nobody calls that a listener.
A listener, which is clearly distinct from L2 switching. Right?
No, but
we'll work on refining it.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's levels of complexity within L2.
Yeah, and there's no first principles. There's no such thing as no L2 switching. Even if all you do is attach it locally to an L3 domain, you're still technically doing L2 switching through essentially a virtual bridge. on the routing function. It just, and you have, there's stuff, there's just a few things you have to configure there no matter what you do. So,
yeah, but I've been in discussions in OPI and it quickly devolves into OVS offload and a much more complex conversation. Then let's just get base L2 pinned, you know, we're pinning max to workloads.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that's the thrust of what I'm driving towards is you know, we're not talking about OVS offload, we're talking about basic L2 Mac learning switch, I guess. So yeah, let's refine the terminology, and we probably want to, and that's the next question. What's the best way forward to pin down this scope? Do we do it as comments in Dan Daly's PR, or do we, you know, actually put in a? Do I put in a separate PR for a milestone 1 scope, and we do the discussion there?
no, well, so I think we should just it's like code, right? This is the skeleton, the code. Take this document and edit it, and then we can upload we'll upload another revision of this document that has spelled out the phasing, and say, okay, given this scope, here's here's the phasing, and add a section to the document that says, here's how it's going to be phased. Here's the more detailed definition. I don't see a reason to proliferate documents unless somebody really wants that and has a good argument for it.
So I guess just from a procedural perspective, the issue might be that so Dan Daly owns the PR for this document, and he's not attending this meeting. He rarely attends. So in terms of moving this forward, it might be easier if we start a fresh document that one of us owns.
Sure. Start. It's fine. Start a fresh document because we can always merge them later.
Yeah.
If we want one document that lays the whole thing out. But starting a fresh document actually isn't much cost now that I think about it. No problem.
Yeah. Guys, I actually think that we need a slightly different approach here. I mean, not only is taking the PR from Intel and trying to tweak it so it fits a wider use case, not a good idea in my mind, but it needs to be up to the vendors themselves to implement all of this. Meaning, because we're talking about Kubernetes environments, my approach is slightly different, as I said, which is every single vendor needs to make sure they have operators that abstract all of this type of code from the upper layers. All OPI needs to do, in my mind, is to define what kind of applications run above and what kind of APIs those applications will be getting, not the implementation and not the nitty-gritty details to some extent what we're seeing here, but rather a much higher abstraction, because trying to have everybody work in this fashion, especially if it's coming from one vendor, will not work. It needs to be something that the vendors do on their own and come up with a final product that fits their overall scope. That's at least my take on it.
I don't understand what you're saying at all, Elad. Can you rephrase it? Because what are you concerned about? People doing work?
Yeah, I'm concerned. I don't understand what you're getting at, Elad, at all.
I mean, I don't see. So go through the specific issues.
What I'm saying is every single vendor, hardware vendor, needs to provide operators that do this type of work internally, and then provide those operators to Kubernetes environment, such as a Red Hat OpenShift. And then all we need to do is tie it in with a workload that makes use of that operator. So I'm not sure that we want to get into the nitty-gritty detail of how one vendor is going to do the routing tables or the L3 endpoint or the link redundancy. It shouldn't be on our plate. It should be on the vendor's plate, and the vendor needs to bring something to make sure that happens.
I don't think that's what Donald. I don't think that's what Donald's getting at here, Elon. I think what he's getting at is that this is to define the API that's common to be able to access those services that the vendor would provide. This isn't about defining how the routing tables are set up or any of that. This is really
I
how do you
understand.
provision and set it up?
I understand. I claim that even the provisioning needs to be done by the vendor and provide an operator that that solidifies all of the provisioning of services from their solution upwards.
And
And
if
all
we
we
get-
need to do,
Then if we go down that path, then you're not going to have a common API.
Yeah, I mean, there's no common networking configuration then. There's no common high-level networking model, because again, the details of the implementation can vary, and there's no networking API then. I mean, and so you think that networking API is out of scope for OPI?
I think that trying to force all the vendors to go down a specific path on networking, you just mentioned one of the problems, OVS or no OVS. So trying to force everybody down a single path will not work. We've seen it happen before. It will not work. We need to ask for a much higher type of abstraction, which is, and we had a great example with IPsec. We say, here's Strong Swan, here are the plugins into Strong Swan. Do what you need to do to get to that level of APIs that feed Strong Swan or to talk to Strong Swan, and then each and every vendor needs to make sure that they can do that. For me, going after the application level rather than lower layers is
So-
easier.
So can we see an actual proposal? That says, here's a better way of considering, and here's why it's better, that we can then review and discuss and refine, and then maybe this will actually have to come to a vote as to which way to proceed, and but it's a little hard to argue it just in the air without seeing the points laid out and so on. So can you guys make a proposal as to why you think that's the better way for networking APIs for DPUs and OPI to be done? And again, you could cite the reasons you just cited, but I want to see it. I'd like to see it laid out in a proposal and think about the trade-offs of doing it sort of a layer up, because it's going to mean a lot of specific configuration across DPUs, and that's what OPI was trying to avoid. Right? We were trying to get enough detailed APIs to have, and again, OVS versus Sonic, for example, that's two different. That might end up being two different subsets of APIs, because there are two legit ways to do your networking inside your DPU. But if that's the cost we have to pay, it's the cost we have to pay. If you're going to try to abstract a level up, I'm not sure. I'm still not sure exactly what you'd configure, because the IPsec case is specific to Strong Swan and how it is constructed.
Yeah, and even then we've made comments that the way it's defined as being very specific for Strong Swan needs to be more generic, because it's calling very specific Strong Swan type calls, and there are other IPsec implementations that people may want to utilize.
And that's fine. What I'm saying is that when there are specific engines on the card and they are on the hardware and they're using some sort of engine on the card, like in the NVIDIA case Doka and in other cases P4, to create the pipeline, if you will, between the API and the actual engines on the card, that should be on the vendor, not on us, to make those connections.
Right.
But we're already developing the middle layer here. I mean, the OPI VPN bridge that we are developing right now is the middle layer. So a similar middle layer needs to be available when you have like those common APIs. But the OPI VPN bridge is the middle layer, and it is pluggable also for multiple vendors. So you can actually put any vendor plugin in that OPI VPN bridge in order to offload correctly whatever you have on your high-level API down to rules on your DPU or IPU engine. If you use P4, then it will be like a P4 enabled vendor plugin. If you use like RT Flow, it would be an RT Flow enabled vendor plugin. So
But
we
it's
are
not optimized. I mean, last time I looked at the middle layer that was suggested by Intel, it was highly optimized for Intel and for nobody else. Some of the vendors didn't need it. Some of the vendors just didn't like it.
Nobody said it didn't like it. Who said that?
Well, in any case, I thought that Red Hat had a more general offering that they were going to bring. I saw Rashid join OPI, and I thought Red Hat is going to bring something much more high level to this. Maybe they still will, but I was, based on conversations we've had with Red Hat, we were looking to see something more, as I said, abstracted and general, so it would fit a lot more use cases. I think getting into the nitty gritty of how to configure these type of attributes is a bit problematic.
So Alon, you keep saying nitty gritty, but it's not nitty gritty. It's the key configuration for setting up networking that absolutely needs to be in common across DPU families and DPU vendors. I mean, it's one of the key configurations, along with storage and along with some of the services that have been outlined, additional ones coming, and along with the provisioning and sort of core behavior of the DPUs. I mean, the problem we have in the industry right now with DPUs is they have to be used as only as kind of individual opaque things that work well as part of closed solutions. Hyperscalers and some of the other things that are out have been published out there and aren't really being used as widely as they could be, partly because of this reason. I mean, we've had customers in this forum tell us that, and in fact, they wanted even higher, they wanted both higher and lower level commonality if they had their way, at least a few customers that came and talked to us. So
well,
it's not nitty gritty. It's I see it as more essential as opposed to nitty gritty that you ought to not touch.
Yeah, and I guess from a Red Hat perspective, we see it as essential prerequisites. I mean, I think to your point, we are wanting to get to better levels of abstraction, but we can't get there without getting some of the fundamentals established first. Red Hat are trying to work with multiple vendors, and there isn't even agreement on these absolute basics yet. So it's very hard to talk about abstractions and use cases when we haven't even got consensus on these, as I've described them, foundational issues.
So can you go to the next slide, please? Not this one, the next one. So are you expecting to actually define what these APIs have, or just say we need an API that does this?
Define them. And the definition may be in terms of, go use this open config set of models for this part, right? Because you don't want to necessarily.
For me, that's the how, Joe. But as soon as you say use these tools, you're already saying the how. And I think that having people. Sorry?
You have to say how. I mean, saying open config is not how, it's specifying an API, not an implementation. I mean, it implies certain behaviors because every API and every model implies certain behaviors from POSIX on forward to all the stuff we have now. I mean, there's no, I guess I don't understand the Okay, I guess I still don't understand uh, uh, the concern from an OPI charter point of view, or from a what we really ought to be doing point of view, or from a utility value point of view. What's the concern?
I think Joe, you put it well to Elad earlier, which was let's let him put forward the proposal that he has in mind for
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, right up, because I'm willing to entertain it a lot. I mean, I'm not bothered. I just it hasn't clicked for me yet. So maybe write it down and let's review it and let's have another discussion on that next week, because we want to sort of agree to the approach and attempt to get as many people working as we can. So would you bring in kind of what it would look like if you did it the way you're suggesting?
I will
Or
speak to Red Hat. They had it already written down. I don't know why they're not presenting it, but Red Hat already had it all written down
Oh, they
and
did
figured
it.
out, at least on the high level.
So Donald, could you bring up the presentation you did? I'd have to go dig for it in the GitHub, or could you bring up the first one you guys did?
The one
Yeah,
4 weeks
from-
ago, 4 weeks
Yeah,
ago.
yeah, 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks.
So that's in the first half of this deck, and it
Right.
was the kind of context I skipped through just to say this is what I presented. And so the context that we set 4 weeks ago is that exactly the case where we make contributions that are high level abstracted and use case orientated, we haven't succeeded with yet because we're not getting consensus across vendors. And I
Yeah.
think one of the reasons for that is because those high level use case contributions suit one vendor potentially and not others, which is one of the points you made, Elad. And Red Hat working with multiple vendors really see that there's still far too much unresolved and we're struggling to reach consensus. So we're wanting to refocus on the fundamentals first. That doesn't mean we're not interested in abstractions and high level use cases, but we need to get the fundamentals right first, which, as we said, was some basic provisioning, basic networking, and the ability to run workloads. And then we can build on those. And just skipping forward, provisioning, we're really talking about automated provisioning at scale, because having the tools to provision an individual machine in a lab doesn't scale and isn't something
Yeah,
that
I get all of that. Those are not the slides I was looking for. There are other slides that have, because I agree with all of this. I mean, I agree with everything that is said here and these
But
slides.
the
I agree
third-
that we need these type of,
The
but then you
third
go in
bullet,
and
no, the third bullet is you agree with that? Because that's what we've been talking about, is what does that mean?
I
And
understand
the
that
word
we're
basic, everyone says basic, but nothing in networking is actually simple. It's just we do it for so long, think it's simple. It's actually not simple. And as soon as you hit, customer issues in the field, which we all do, you realize how not simple it is for everyone else. So basic networking is actually fairly complex, which is why Dan wrote up his list um, and put the networking stuff in there after some discussion, because and why Mark's been going around for a relatively long time, and we have the same problem in other standards consortiums where we try to address networking. We had it in Redfish. They still have it in Redfish. We're having it in, well, I can't talk about that one, but it's in other ones as well, and it's always been this level of detail and complexity and nitty gritty required if you're going to do anything standard on networking. And I believe it's a mistake to say network configuration is out of scope for API. I believe it's a mistake to say that. But if there's some middle ground, Elad, that NVIDIA would like to propose, I'm all ears, because maybe that would unlock moving forward. I just don't see it right now from the discussion and from my history. But I'd love to see it. I mean, again, please come in with an outline and explain how it would actually work, and who would do what to who. In other words, which pieces of software would interact with each others, and where would the API be, and what would it do for you, that would be valuable, and why the L2, L3 specific configuration being vendor unique is actually a good thing as opposed to a bad thing. I'd love to see that proposal.
I need to speak to Red Hat because again, they already had slides, and I'm surprised they didn't share them. I need to speak to the guys.
So I don't know. What slides, Donald? Do you know what slides we're talking about here?
At a guess, it would need to be something coming out from the hardware enablement group under Rashid.
Exactly.
And the same group are the people that are asking for this. So this is
I saw it from Itamar's group, so it was pretty.
In the lifecycle and provisioning or the API meeting in OPI?
No. It wasn't limited to lifecycle. I think they might have not presented it here yet at OPI. I've seen it in different contexts, and I'll need to get back to them and ask them, are they planning to show it at OPI, or what is the story?
If we haven't seen it at OPI, then we're talking about vapor with respect to OPI. So if there's a relevant proposal that ought to be brought in about how DPUs should function in terms of the network configuration scope, then please bring that in so that we can make a decision on whether that's a way to go or not.
Okay, again, I'll speak to Red Hat, and I wish we had more time, but I wanted to ask Tim, because F5 is one of the only ISVs that we have that can actually talk to the challenges that they've been seeing in implementing this, and asked him how he sees it as far as what does he need when he approaches designing a solution over multiple DPUs, IPUs.
Yeah, I having listened to the conversation today and sort of tying a few things together, I think what this slide is asking for is sort of foundational, whether you're writing a platform layer for applications to write on, or whether you want the applications themselves. What we're missing, and this is actually one of HPE's bullet points from the start of this meeting, is APIs for configuring basic networking that are supported by all the vendors' SDKs. Right now, when I'm on IPDK, when I'm on Doka, when I'm on Marvell's toolkit, it's all different, right? I have to do a bespoke implementation on each one today. And I think this is HPE's point. They're not seeing OPI smooth that out and creating uniformity, even at the most basic level of setting up the core networking.
Yep.
And that is something we should just say, let's go solve that. It's not that huge of a problem. Let's define it and then work with the vendors to try to get them to support
it. Even at the level of how do I reference an interface on these cards as I try to set them up, as I try to configure them, is different on all the cards. It would be great to have, call it port 1. How do I reference the first port on the first data port on a card in order to bring it up? And if OPI had a name for that and had a command, bring up port 1 with this IP address, and in the background, all the vendors had to take that command and feed it through their pipelines to do that. That would be awesome. That would be a win. Something as simple as that.
Okay. Creating a basic schema and naming conventions.
Yeah.
And then bigger scope, maybe leaning more towards what Alad's looking for, is could OPI have not a definitive, but at least a 1 or 2 models of what a stack on a DPU looks like? Because once you know what the stack looks like, you can point out where the APIs are. And we tend to wander around without a framework, and we all get confused and talk past each other.
Yeah, I don't think that's why we talk past each other, but and again, we've had sort of this top down, what does the stack consist of, um, view a couple of times a few times early on.
And I think we walked away from it, Joe, because it wasn't productive, at least at that time. So
It wasn't productive, correct.
I agree.
So,
But maybe
right.
we need to start, as Red Hat is proposing, with some very basic things that says, hey, you can build any kind of stack you want, but you're going to need these interfaces. Let's standardize them.
Absolutely. So Laud, if you can bring at least send a reference to what you're talking about, if it's public information, if it's posted somewhere that's accessible, not within OPI, but just out in general of what you're talking about, send that on the mailing list. If you can't, and it came through another avenue, can you please bring that in here? Because I feel like we're arguing against something we can't see, and that's very difficult, or arguing for it. I mean, I could say, you know, that we can't see even the first level of detail on, because and then if you have a proposal for how it should work, please bring that in as well, because we need, and again, competing proposals is fine. If there's a better way, then let's do the better way, but we need it brought in. So can you do that, Alon?
Sure, I'll speak to Red Hat and find out what their plans are. If that it was something that they just shared with us, or are they planning to share it at OPI? I saw Rashid join as a sign that that's what they're planning to do, but I might have read it wrong.
Yeah, that's again the different. I think it's different things. And again, if you know, you made an argument initially about where the API should be set and why, and seeing what that configuration would actually look like. Just again, it can be words, diagrams, sort of at the outline level, saying, here's what the API really should be. You know, here's the proposal from NVIDIA on where the API should be set. That would be an excellent thing to evaluate. So
Sure.
I like the, I mean, I like the discussion, but to go beyond just, you know, to go, you know, do something useful with it, we need to see it.
I understand.
Okay.
I'm trying to prevent us from going down a rabbit hole that we've all seen organizations go down. It might be necessary, but it's not a pretty sight.
No,
So I'll go back to Red Hat. I'll find out what their plans are. It's not going to be an NVIDIA proposal. It's going to be a Red Hat proposal where NVIDIA is supportive of it. And I'll just go back and speak to them and see what they're planning to do.
okay, so you're speaking on behalf of another part of Red Hat, not the people on the call, for an approach.
I don't know, Joe. I don't know who's on the call and who isn't. I just need to speak to the guys that I conversed with on Reddit that shared that with us and find out what their plans are as far as incorporating OPI into their overall plan and figure that part out.
Okay. All right, fair enough. All right, we're at time. Thank you for the lively discussion, and you know, hopefully we can resolve this part next week on the 21st. Thank you everyone for your time. Excellent discussion. And I'll post the HPE list in the meeting minutes when I get them. All right, we're done for this week.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.